everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Esther Archange, and I'm an academic trainer with the Center for Teaching and Learning. Today's session is titled, Working with Online Survey Providers with faculty member Dr. Mary Stray. Thank you for being here with us today. Just a reminder, I am recording the webinar and the video will be posted on the CTL LibGuides page within 24 hours. If you have questions throughout today's session, we ask that you hold them towards the end of the presentation and we'll answer them in our Q&A section. You can use the Q&A or the chat feature located at the bottom of the Zoom window. We do prefer you use the Q&A if you have any questions throughout this presentation. With that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Mary.
So I just wanted to thank all of you for taking some time to be here today. I know a lot of you are probably thinking about doing an online survey. It's a pretty easy way to do research in today's world of research. So it kind of makes sense. And I put this webinar together because I had done some research and I was working with Qualtrics, which is the name of one of the online providers. And it kind of struck me after I did it, like, wow, I wish I knew this. Like, oh, I made that mistake. Oh, I wish I hadn't done this. And I was like, I should maybe put something together. So I wrote an article and I was surprised when it got published. I was like, all right, I like that. And then I thought I would share it with the students here at NCU who are thinking about doing an online survey, because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know, that no one told me, or things that maybe I should have thought about. So I'm hopeful that this information will be able to help you if you're thinking about doing this to kind of avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made along the way. Okay, so let me just go to the next page. Okay, so I had some learning objectives. There were 4 of them. One was to be aware of the policies and procedures of online survey platform providers regarding recruitment and data collection, because a lot of them have very specific protocols that they follow that I wasn't aware of. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, because it's important to be mindful of that when you're thinking about who you want to have in your study and how to go about kind of putting that strategy together for your sampling. Actively incorporate the rules and regulations of the online survey platform providers into the research design. So when you're putting together your research proposal, you want to think about some of these rules and regulations and how they go about doing it. And you want to incorporate that into your plan, into your research design. Recognize the strengths and weaknesses of using anonymous online surveys and evaluate whether or not this is a good fit for you. This is something that you really want to do. And then identify strategies to avoid respondent fatigue, missing data and/or nonsense responses, and clarity of recruitment when designing anonymous online surveys. So these were my 4 main objectives that I wanted to just spend a little bit of time covering today. All right. So sampling, questions, and resolution. This is something that I kind of grappled with a little bit. Initially, this is a study that I did looking at remote employees, people who work virtually like I do, for different lengths of time. So what I initially was going to do was just sample people that I worked with, my coworkers, because there are some people that have been doing this for many, many years, and then there are some people that are newer at it. So I was like, ooh, that would be a pretty easy, convenient sample to use. But then when I really thought about that a little bit more, I was like, I think it would probably make more sense if they're people that I don't know, because sometimes when it's people you're biased as a person. So the people that because of that are probably going to be a little bit more like you. And also the people that are willing to do the survey are probably going to be ones who are more like my friends or peers that I get along with a little bit better. So they're probably going to be like, okay. So there's going to be a lot of bias built into convenience sampling. And then the other thing that I was thinking about when I was designing my survey was that I'm only going to be looking at people who work at an online university, so in education, in academia. And people who are in education or academia probably different than people who are in marketing, than people who are in sales, and people who are in finance. Like everyone's a little bit different. So I thought it would be better if I actually used a provider like Qualtrics, which is one of them. There's a bunch of them that are those. That's the big one that I know that NCU actually has a relationship with, as well as SurveyMonkey is the other big one. So I thought about it and I'm like, I think it would make more sense if I had a sampling of people that I don't know, so it's less bias, and they're from all different types of careers and business settings. So that way I get kind of a better sense of, overall what's going on out there. I wasn't going to be, more focused on just education. And by doing that, what we call the external validity, or the ability to generalize the results to a larger sample of people, was really enhanced. So I think that was another important reason. So when you're figuring out your sampling plan, that's something to really think about, how to go about doing it. And the cool thing is a lot of these providers like Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey, they were able to find people. Note, I did this study, gosh, it's been a couple of years now, like 2017 or 18. So even before COVID and all that came about, because I was looking at the habits and attitudes and beliefs of people who work remotely and kind of what they do, but with people who've been doing it for different lengths of time. So I had people who have been doing it for a year or two, and then I also had people who had been doing it for 10 years or more. But the cool thing is when you're working with these providers, they can help you to find individuals who have these really kind of niche, obscure, characteristics that you might be looking for. So they actually do the recruiting for you. The question is, how good is it, or how accurate is it? And especially when you're using participants, if it's anonymous. So I actually like it if there's a way you can verify the participants and their identity, who they are, and maybe even follow up with them afterwards. But if you're doing an anonymous survey through a provider like Qualtrics, that's something that you can't do. If you want to be able to kind of follow up with them, you're going to have to pay more, because you do pay per participant. Say that 10 times fast. And the more obscure or difficult it is, to recruit the participant, like say you're looking for Tibetan monks, that's going to be really tough to recruit those people, because they may be really hard to find and they may be very unplugged and disconnected. So my point being is that will cost more money. It will add more per participant cost. And if you're able to verify your participants instead of it being completely anonymous, that will also add more to your cost, because then they have to get their email, they have to get their contact information for you, and they want to make sure that that kind of aligns with their responses. If I had it to do over again, I probably would have paid a little bit more to have the ability to confirm or verify the participants and to follow up with them later on in time as well. Especially now with everything that's been going on with the pandemic, I would have loved to have been able to kind of follow up with these people and see, are they still doing it? Is it 15 years or more now for people? And what were some of their behaviors and patterns of what they're doing, the regular daily practices? And my study was looking at, is this something that is sustainable? Is this something that we can do over the long term, working remotely? And for people who do it, I think it was 20 hours or more was the criteria or that I used in my survey that I did. Okay, so what you want to do then is you want to make sure it's very clear and specific about how they're recruiting the participants and the vetting process. Vetting meaning making sure they are who they say they are. And how can you maybe confirm that? What do they do? And you want to include that in your research methodology as well, because that's part of that whole process. So I think if I had to do that again with Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, I would ask for a lot more information and a lot more details about that. And if there was some way that I could follow up with them afterwards and make it be, mostly anonymous, but not entirely anonymous, where you could follow up as well. Okay. Now, I would also say, however, that if the topic itself is maybe a more sensitive topic, anything to do with sexuality, violence against women, or abuse or neglect, things like that, you probably would be better then to keep it anonymous. And the reason being is people will not be as honest with their responses, and they're less likely to want to do the survey at all, especially if it's a sensitive topic or something, that could reflect poorly on them, or get back to someone in some way. I think then in cases like that, you would want to keep it anonymous, because you're not going to get as true responses. People will not be as truthful or as honest. And you want them to be honest, and you want them to feel comfortable in being honest and not worrying about, is this going to get back to so-and-so? And are they going to try to get back at me? Or my parents going to find out that I was smoking pot on the weekend, and, that kind of stuff. So you want to keep it anonymous in situations like that. But if it's not a really high risk type of topic, like the one that I did, I think you're probably better off doing it where they can vet the participants, and you can actually identify them and follow up with them down the road. So just some thoughts to share there on that. Okay, I hope I'm not talking too fast. I am from New York, so I do tend to talk fast sometimes, so please forgive me if I'm speaking too quickly. Okay, so when you're actually designing your survey, something else to think about is what we call subject or participant fatigue. So try to keep the survey as brief as you can. Don't have it to be too lengthy, because people tend to kind of zone out after a while. I'm sure, I don't know, most of you probably have done a survey at some point. I know I was just doing one the other day, and I was like, can I just be done? I was like, all right, I just popping in all the same answers. And I was like, no, you shouldn't do this. Come on, you're a researcher. Don't be lazy. Go back there and be accurate. But I think that kind of happens where people, after a certain point, they just get kind of tired of it. So be mindful of that. And, try not to, this is the other thing that I think I did. I was trying to do too much in one survey. So maybe just if you look at the survey and maybe you have topics, I actually had 4 distinct areas or topics that I was focusing on, do 4 separate surveys. You know what I'm saying? If you can, or maybe shorten those areas so you can make it one that's more manageable, because people, like I said, will definitely start to zone out. The other thing to think about too is if you can create what are called forced choice response categories. So create categories in more closed-ended type of responses. So, for example, I might ask, how many hours per week are you online? Just as an example. Instead of just leaving that, well, that's not a good example. Or what types of websites do you typically visit every week? I might have categories like social media pictures, like Instagram, social media interactions, like Snapchat or Facebook. I would like to watch videos. So I might have categories that they could then check off. If you have kind of this open-ended where they can just put anything in, sometimes people don't respond, or I had people making stuff up. They were just like, oh, and how are you today? Isn't it a lovely day? And I was like, really? What are they writing? Because I think sometimes they don't know what the question is being asked, or what it is that you're trying to get at. So if you have those categories kind of included already, and then maybe have one that's more open-ended where you could say other, and then have them specify, what it is that they're trying to get at. But having those forced choice response categories really helps to make it easier for people to kind of complete the survey and to do it a little bit quicker and without as much confusion. If you have too many what are called open-ended responses, where people can just kind of type in whatever they want as a response, you're going to get a lot of blanks and a lot of kind of responses that are not, you're just going to have to toss them. They're not really very beneficial or useful. That was my experience. And I've done a lot of survey research before this study as well, but I'm just using this study as an example. All right. Okay, so with that in mind, you want to check on the accuracy of the survey materials before the survey is actively launched or deployed as well. Because sometimes, and I had this happen where one of the questions, it wasn't transcribed properly. And I think they like flipped a couple of words or something like that. So you want to really double check that and do a couple of dry runs, really take your time to carefully read through everything before they officially launch it. And they'll usually work with you on that to make sure. But even when they work with you and you seem like everything's on the same page, you still want to go in there on day one that it's deployed and just double check it and make sure that they're not missing anything, that everything was really like you said it would be, because sometimes people upload the wrong file or they, mistakes happen. We're all human. So it's really good to get in the habit of kind of adding that step into that process. And then this is the other thing that I learned, reviewing the data along the way as it's being collected and putting that into your research methodology would be really, really important to do, because sometimes you're going to see, like I had that bogus data. I had that one person who was like, oh, and how are you today? And oh, isn't it a lovely day? Oh, and I miss you too. And how are you doing? And I was like, what are they doing? Who are they writing to? So if you can catch that along the way, a lot of these online providers like Qualtrics will just remove that participant. And in the contract that you have with them, they're required to then recruit somebody else and find somebody else who is providing, substantial data for you and not bogus data. However, you have a certain time frame that you have to do that within. I should have read the full contract ahead of time, because I think if you do it, this was some time ago though, so you'd have to double check your contract within like 2 weeks of when I had closed the survey. As long as I find that within that 2-week timeline, they would then have to go back in and find other people to sub in and to make up for that. So it's just something to really read and review carefully. And I would say when you're doing your research design, to create it in a way where you have checks like, okay, after week 1, I'm going to do a check and I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a random checkpoint and look at the data, see if anything's missing or bogus. Does everything look okay? And then, for however long, the data collection period is, every data collection period will be a little different. So you want to be mindful of that as well. And then, communicate with the provider and make sure that you're letting them know, hey, this response is no good. You have to get rid of it. But build that into your research design, into the process. That way you're going to get more for your buck. You're going to get better quality data, and you're going to really make sure that, they're recruiting the people that are good participants who are really, giving you good information. Okay. And if you can get help with editors or anyone in the Qualtrics side, I know I worked with a bunch of people. They have people who had pretty good expertise in survey research and how to create questions and things like that. So you can reach out to them if you say, I want to use this wording or whatever. What do you think? That kind of thing. It's probably better to do that a little bit on your own ahead of time, but don't hesitate to reach out to them if you have questions, or if you're working with faculty or an NCU, definitely reach out to them and use them as a good sounding board. You can always reach out to me as well. I've done many, many years of survey research and market research. I was a market researcher for many years. So I had to draw up all these surveys, and I also was responsible for doing what are called focus groups. So I know I talked a little bit about those open-ended questions where you're trying to kind of ask people things about, what do you think about this? What do you feel about that? If your survey has a lot of those, you probably should do what's called a focus group instead. So a focus group is where people kind of come together and they actually have discussions and they talk about this as a group. So it's just something to think about. How am I doing on time? Okay, I think I'm still doing okay. Okay, so when working, just to kind of summarize some of the things that I've been talking about today, when you're working with these online survey providers, make sure that you're including the specific recruitment and vetting policies and procedures. And put this in your methodology, in your methods section. And you might want to make changes or additions to it, but I think it's really important to think about that. And the topic, of course, will be important to consider in that as well. The second thing is you want to build in steps to check the survey wording. So before it goes live, and then even again after it goes live, to make sure it's really fitting with what it is that you want to ask. And then think about the length of the survey as we discussed, because if it's too long, after a certain point, like I said, people do tend to just kind of zone out. And the data it'll be okay, but as we all know, garbage in, garbage out. So you want to get good data. That's really the key. You want it to be really rich. You want it to be really accurate and honest. So if it's too long, the survey is too long, you're going to find that as you get further along in the survey, that data is not going to be as good in its quality and caliber. So try to be concise and think very mindfully about the questions that you're going to ask. And then the other thing to consider is the order, as well as the wording of the question. Sometimes when you're doing a research study, and it's one that maybe you're excited about, or you have very strong opinions or beliefs, you might choose a word that is a little leading. So it's kind of like saying, how fast was the car going when he slammed into you? Versus how fast was the car going when you bumped into each other? Can you see the difference there? So you have to be very mindful of your own biases and your own beliefs and how they're in any way coming through in the survey questions. So with that in mind, I would think it's really important to have, a couple of sets of eyes looking at that and being objective and clear in kind of reviewing that and making sure that your own biases are not coming through. Because we all think, I'm not biased. No, I don't have any biases, but we all do. We're human. It's part of our human condition. So that's something to really think about and reflect on more. And then the order sometimes of the questions, believe it or not, can impact other questions. So you're talking about one topic earlier on in the survey, and then later on you talk about a different topic, but it's somewhat related. You can have an effect. It's called an order effect. So something to think about there is you might have, half the participants get, topic A first and topic B second, and then the others do it the other way around, just to see if there's any kind of impact there in the data. But it's important to think about that and to look at the flow. Does it make sense? And trying to be very mindful in when you're doing each topic and each question. And make sure they're clear too. Sometimes the questions aren't clear, or people are like, I'm not sure. I think I know what this means, but I'm not sure. And then the other thing, like I talked about, creating checks for reviewing missing or bogus data are really important considerations when you're working with online survey providers. Like I said, a lot of these providers, in the contract that you sign, they have specific policies for bogus or missing data that they have to honor when you sign that contract with them. And a lot of them have timelines around that. So if if it goes past that 2 weeks, you're kind of out of luck. So definitely look at that contract, talk about that with the provider and what you do. What should you do when something like that happens? Usually you're going to have like a point person that you're going to be in contact with who's going to be managing your project and helping you with it. And they can then say, oh yeah, you're right. We'll have to remove them from the data set and then go and give you a new participant. Also, when you're done with the study, you should get like a data set that you can have access to. And Qualtrics has some really cool things. You can run like statistics, you can do crosstabs, and you can store it on their website as well. So something to be, I find that to be very helpful also. And then the very last thing, you want to use shorter surveys, like we discussed, because people get bored. And also it keeps the cost down. I think with Qualtrics, I think if it's under 30 questions, it's free. So if you can keep it under 30, go for it, because you're still going to have to pay for the recruitment of the participants. But if it's over 30 questions that you have, you do have to pay more. So your cost starts to go up incrementally as the survey gets longer, and also the quality of the responses starts to go down as well. So it's something to really be mindful of. Okay, so I think in lieu of what I was just talking about going on too long, I want to try to keep this kind of short and sweet for all of you. So I just had some discussion questions. Did you learn anything, hopefully, about working with online survey platform providers? What do you want to consider adding to your research methods? How many topics do you want to cover? Does the order of the presentation matter? And what are some pros and cons of using anonymous self-report questions in an online survey? So those are just some discussion questions I just wanted to throw out there in case any of you had any thoughts, or if you had any other questions about the presentation, you can always email me as well. I'm at mstraight@ncu.edu. And I really appreciate all of you listening to me, sharing some of my insights and wisdom about working with online survey providers. And I hope you all have very successful research. And survey research is really a very easy way to do research, especially with our pandemic and with COVID going on. It's a way that you can still have a lot of access to participants without having any risk of exposure or anything else like that. So I think it's a really good way to get research done in today's world. So that's it. So thank you.
Awesome. There are a few folks answering some of these discussion questions. Some of these discussion questions were actually asked in the Q&A. So we're going to get to that as well. So you are ahead of the game, Dr. Mary. And I also wanted to also mention in the chat, I also posted the link for Qualtrics from the NCU LibGuides page under the Academic Success Center. If you guys would like to create a Qualtrics using NCU resources, that link shows it. I'll drop it one more time just to make sure. I know everybody is thanking you and saying how informative the presentation was in the chat right now. But I am adding that link one more time, just in case anyone missed it, so you have access to that. So we can do a couple of things here. We can go directly to the Q&A. Right now I have 12 questions sitting in the Q&A.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And I also just wanted to add that I forgot, I did get this published and it's in the NCU library. So if any of you want to read the whole article, I just included that in the reference for everyone as well.
Even better. Also, a book is already published at NCU. So please access that for those of you who have more questions, especially after this presentation as well. All right, so we can go to the Q&A. I'll try, while we're doing Q&A, I'll keep my eye on the chat as well. Sure. If you have specific questions, it's easier for me to read them in the Q&A as opposed to going back and forth to the chat. So let's go ahead and go back to the Q&A. We have, why will online survey providers not give you details of recruitment of participants and collection of data procedures, and wait till you start before certain things are made known to you? I want to use Qualtrics for my survey.
Yeah, I don't think it's that they're not providing them. They are providing them, but I think what I'm trying to say is you want to make sure you're really reading it very carefully and going over every line of the contract. I was like one of those, when you get those contract things where you have to sign and it's just like 10,000 pages and you're like, and you're just like, let me just sign it. That was kind of my mistake. So I was just sharing that. It's not that they're not telling you that information. They do, but I think it's really important that you really take the time to really read it very carefully, because they usually have very specific details about, what you're entitled to and what you're not entitled to with the money that you're going to pay for that.
We have a couple of questions coming up relating to costs. I did see on the website, on the Academic Success Center website, that Qualtrics is free to its students. I'm assuming that's up to certain limitations. Correct me if I'm wrong. We'll
Yes.
get to that.
Yes, it's usually up to 30 questions, and then the recruitment would be on your own. So if you want to do a survey that's usually a little lengthier, and I think the 30 questions usually are closed, or the forced choice questions too. So it's kind of like the very basic vanilla, and then they're not recruiting the participants for you, which to many of our students, that's a very attractive feature, because to be honest, when you're doing a survey, any kind of survey research, that's the hard part, is getting people to participate, and they do it so quickly. I couldn't believe how quickly they did it. And I was like, it's done, really? Like, I was shocked. So, but that's where it gets to be costly. I think when I did it, I think I had about 128 participants, and I think it was about $7 or $8 per participant. So it does add up.
Okay.
Just to kind of give you a ballpark. And that was some time ago. So it's probably gone up since, especially now with inflation.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
But if you keep it shorter, your costs will be much more manageable. So that's why I was saying it's probably better to do 4 mini surveys instead of doing one big one, because one, you're minimizing the cost, and also you're minimizing the issue of participant fatigue as well.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you who are trying to cut costs.
Yeah, I remember in grad school, even now, I mean, everyone's trying to cut costs. So
true.
Yeah.
I think we lightly covered some of these, but I do want to touch this. I have a specific occupational requirements for my dissertation survey, and I need a large number of participants. Does NCU have any agreements with providers I can leverage, and is there a cost to me? It's basic.
Yeah, you can have them restrict, the participants based on the title. You can do that, because I actually had asked them to do that as well. Again, it's going to add a little bit of cost to your survey, but like we discussed, earlier, it's better to do that because you're going to get better quality, and you want the data to be that quality, that rich. You want it to be what you want to focus in on. So I think it's money well spent if you can do that.
Awesome.
I don't know if that answered their question. I hope I answered their question.
Okay. If you feel like that question wasn't answered, you can go back in the Q&A and I'll get back to you.
Let me know.
Or the chat, whichever one. I'll keep my eyes out. It says, hi, Dr. Mary. This is from James. I don't know if I'm pronounced Dr. James. I don't want to mispronounce that name, but it starts with a G.
I know, James. Okay. Hi, James. How are you?
Your former student here.
Yes. He's not a student anymore.
Yeah. He said, what is the process of getting acceptance to use a survey with the IRB and the choice of population considerations?
Okay. So the IRB, obviously here at NCU, you have to go through and you have to get them to review and approve your survey and your study. I would think it would depend on the topic, what you're surveying people on, if it's something more sensitive in nature, and also the participants themselves. As we all know, minors, children, and people who are prisoners or have some kind of limited mental capacity or capability are protected populations. So in situations like that, it's going to be obviously more challenging to get the survey through the IRB. But with all that aside, if it's a fairly straightforward topic, I think probably the biggest issues will be a confidentiality, how you're going to store the data, things like that. Afterwards, what steps are you going to take to keep it secure and confidential, even if it's anonymous? Things like that will be more a primary concern to the IRB. I was an IRB reviewer for many, many years, so that's why I can speak to this as well. But I think other than that, it's usually not as challenging as some other types of studies where you're doing an actual intervention. But again, I would preface that with it really would depend on the topic and what you're asking. But you still need the full IRB review, absolutely.
Okay. This is quite a bit of a question, so I'm going to try my best to summarize it.
Okay.
Louis says, my survey is anonymous and focused on Georgia participants only, but hundreds of participants took the survey. I'm using Qualtrics outside of the state of Georgia. When I verified it, they really live in, he's trying to figure out whether or not these folks lived in Georgia. So he's using IP addresses, different ways to figure out if these folks live in Georgia. So I guess it's location specific for his participants. Let me see.
So did they do already, if they already did the survey, it's kind of too late, but if they haven't done it yet, I would actually reach out and talk to the Qualtrics contact person and ask them how to go about doing that and building that into the process in the research methodology itself. So that way you can confirm, like I was saying, I wanted to vet, the participants, and they did it through Qualtrics, but I also wanted to have a way to do it myself because I'm not trusting them 100%. So you might want to reach out to them and ask them how they can do that.
Okay. Let's see. Amber asks, can you use Qualtrics for a case study?
For a case study, I don't know. I think you can work with them and they can help you to do interviews, things like that, or focus groups. I'm not sure you really would need to, though, because a case study, as we all know, is usually just one person. So I would probably do a Zoom interview or something like that if you were going to do it, through technology or in person, preferably if you're able to do it. But case study is probably not as likely to use Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey or something like that.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is related to something that was said during the presentation, or if Belinda can clarify, or if you can answer it. Were incentives used to complete the survey?
I couldn't quite hear you. Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
Were incentives used to complete the surveys? Incentives?
Were interviews used to complete the survey? Is that what she said?
It says incentives.
Oh, incentives. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you. It was so quiet.
No worries.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, Qualtrics, they have their own way of providing incentives to participants. So they do pay their participants. They are given, incentives for their participation. Absolutely, yes. And you can, again, get all that information in the contract about what the incentives are, how they go about doing it. Every survey will be a little bit different, but you want to have that really spelled out clearly because that's important to include in your methodology.
Awesome. Okay, Amber, can you start out with a survey and then move participants to a Zoom interview?
As long as it's a part of your research plan ahead of time, absolutely, yeah. That would be like probably two phases, a survey and maybe a focus group follow-up or something like that. Yeah. They do focus groups as well there. They do provide that platform for you to do that also. So they're not just surveys, they also do focus groups and things like that.
Awesome. Lou is saying, I sent incentives after the survey is completed, $15 e-gift cards. I guess that's an option for folks.
Yeah, you can provide, if you want to do that as well, in addition, but Qualtrics, they usually do provide them with some type of financial incentive or other incentives and rewards. So that's how they get people to do it.
Awesome.
They're not just volunteering.
Okay. Owen says some research studies recommend certain time limits on surveys. What do you recommend as a good time limit for a survey?
That's a really good question. And I would, again, say it depends on, you're going to work with your Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey provider as well, but it depends on the topic and also the type of participant that you're trying to recruit and how difficult they are to find. Like the example I gave of the Tibetan monks, you might want to have a longer time where you're having that survey open until you can recruit, the sample size that you need. So, but I would add that in most cases, Qualtrics, I thought they were pretty quick. I think they, a week and it's done. And that was a longer survey. They're pretty fast in getting the data the participants recruited and the data completed. But that's why you also want to check it along the way. Because I'm always, when something goes really quick like that, I'm always like, wait a minute, let's make sure this is really quality data we're getting here. Yeah.
We had a presenter, name is not coming to me now, but she presented about online surveys and how bots had
that was Maria, I think. Yeah.
Yes. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you don't want the bots in there at all. And that's what I'm saying. You want to make sure that their policy is clear on how they're recruiting. And you want to also double check it along the way as well. So you're getting really good data. Yeah, that's important.
Awesome. All right. Lou is asking, how can I hire someone from Qualtrics to help analyze my data?
Well, if it's for your dissertation, I don't know. But if it's for your own independent, again, ask the Qualtrics people. They'll run all kinds of analyses, crosstabs, stuff like that. They'll do it all for you. I mean, obviously there's going to be a cost, but they'll do it for you if that's what you want. You just tell them what it is you want and they'll do it for you. If it's for your own dissertation, I don't think you want to do that. You want to do the data yourself. Just to be, with your integrity, when you're like, I did this is my study, and it's good practice for you to do that. And maybe you could have them do it as well or something to double check you, but I think it's better you do it on your own.
And just another reminder to folks, I know some people put stuff in the chat. I have to comb through to find the questions in the chat. I'll try my best to get to them, but it's a lot easier if it's in the Q&A for me to answer, okay? Let's see, Noel is asking, does Qualtrics provide theme analysis?
What kind of analysis?
Theme, T-H-E-M-E, theme.
Theme analysis? I would think so, like factor analysis, is that what they're thinking about?
I am not quite sure, Noel, if you're still there, if you want to clarify what you mean by theme analysis.
But they do they'll do all the multivariate statistics that we have available to us. So they can do anything. They can do multiple regression. They can do all kinds of stuff. So they got all the bells and whistles, that they are able to do and provide for you. But again, I think for your dissertation, that's something that you really want to be doing on your own. After your dissertation, then maybe. But obviously, again, the more extensive analyses that you're going to be asking for people to help and support you with, the more costly. It's going to be quite expensive. So I don't think that's something that you want to get into the regular habit of doing. And it's better for you to be able to learn how to do it, because then you're going to be a really valuable resource and commodity in wherever you go. Let me tell you, that's opened so many doors for me, because in my career, I was kind of good at math and I liked it. Yes, I'm a nerd, I admit it, but it opened a lot of doors because I was good at statistics and I was willing to do the work and to become familiar with how to do those different analyses. And I think it will be really to your benefit to do that in the long run.
And just so you know, he did clarify, helping to find themes in qualitative research.
Qualitative research, yes. I would say qualitative research, you're probably better off doing something like a qualitative research analyses through like a program. There's programs that do that. I think qualitative, I would kind of stay clear of them doing that, because that's a whole different world. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going through these questions. I see questions are still coming in. We're going to try our best.
Oh my goodness. I picked a hot topic, I guess, huh?
That's not a bad thing. Very important. I'm learning a lot too, just listening to you. So I'm sure they're learning a lot as well. Okay, Philip, I'm not sure what you mean by this question. I do see per participant. So if you would like to clarify that either in the Q&A or the chat for me, I can get back to you. Let's see, anonymous. Is it possible to use the pose and Qualtrics in the same study?
To use Qualtrics, and what was the other thing? I'm sorry.
Pose, DEPOSE. I'm not familiar with that one.
Depose. I don't really know what that is. I'm sorry.
Oh, somebody said
Deduce. I have no idea what that is. I apologize.
okay. We're not sure what that is. Let's see.
Now I'm learning. Now I'm taking notes.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one. Can you tell Qualtrics how many participants you are looking for?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to actually ask you to do that.
Right.
That's how they give you the cost, and you should have that in your plan anyway for your sample ahead of time.
Okay. Amber says, my topic is suicide. Would that be too sensitive for a survey?
No, I don't think so. And I mean, in some ways, you might get more responses because it is a survey than something that you would do like in person, because it is a fairly sensitive topic. So I don't think that would be a problem at all.
Lewis clarifying, he had already done the survey. I think that was probably from, is that the Georgia?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So yeah, if he did it already, then you're kind of out of luck, which is what I was saying, that you want to try to make sure to plan for that ahead of time. Like, how are you going to really confirm that these people are in Georgia, you know, and they say who they really are, you know? I think that's something you want to talk about, and it might be important to have that as part of your recruitment plan. Obviously, your costs will go up, but I think it's important sometimes to have that in there.
All right. Let's see. All right. Bernard had a question. When Qualtrics does the recruitment for you, does Qualtrics do the interview with participants? My understanding was, as a research student, the researcher has to interview the participants.
Yeah, for your dissertation, I would probably, I mean, you can use Qualtrics for interviews, but I would say you probably wouldn't need to. You could use Zoom or another platform and do it through that on your own. Qualtrics, I think, is more for surveys, things like that you're going to be doing, where you have a lot of participants that you're trying to get data from at once. It's really more geared towards surveys. You can obviously ask them to help with focus groups, like somebody was saying, you want to follow up maybe after the survey, but you can also do a focus group without Qualtrics as well.
Amber is asking, you mentioned that Qualtrics can help you set up interviews. Would this be for open-ended questions, Zoom interviews?
Yeah, that's like what I was talking about, more like a focus group. So if you want to do like a focus group study or something like that, they do offer that as an option, but it's not their like main forte. Their strength is really the surveys.
Okay.
So you can use them to help you with a focus group, but I would say that really their emphasis is really survey research.
Would paying participants undermine the integrity of your study?
Well, I mean, if you have volunteers, that undermines it too. So there is no perfect world there. There really isn't. So I think it's okay. They're getting something out of it too. So if they're not getting paid, then you have the whole problem of, you know, volunteers, and there's all this bias in volunteer samples as well. So it works. It's okay. It's not a perfect world, unfortunately.
Right.
Oh, glad to help, Donna. I see someone's thanking me. You're welcome. That was my whole point of doing this. I want to try to help all of you, because I know sometimes doing this can be a little bit intimidating, and I hope you can learn from, you know, my experience and some of the things that I learned along the way. I just want to pass it along to all of you.
Awesome.
And you guys, you can also reach out to me. I'm at mstrite@ncu.edu if you have any other questions you want to follow up with afterwards. I know we're starting to get to the top of the hour, so I don't want to continue on over the time that we have allotted, and just being respectful of everyone's time.
You said it's mstrite@ncu.edu, right?
That's right. Yeah, I have another meeting I have to go to also. Thank
No
you.
worries. Okay, so we're going to take this as an opportunity to thank everyone who submitted questions. I'm sorry if I did not get to your question. Again, you can reach out to Dr. Mary. I just dropped her email in the chat so that if you do have any questions, you can reach out to her directly. Really quickly, just to conclude this session, we want to thank Dr. Mary Strite for taking the time to present this informative information about survey providers and providing all the knowledge that she knows today. Thank you to the attendees for being active and joining today. As a reminder, the recording will be posted on the CTL LibGuides page within 24 hours. All right. Have a good one, everyone.
All right. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. Thank you.